Hey everybody, this is Stu Smith and Jeff Nichols with another Tactical Fitness Report. And today we are going to talk about some of the current situations that are occurring. Jeff and I actually have a sort of a disagreement right now going on. Jeff had made a comment on one of his lives about service academies and leadership and situations that are going on in Afghanistan, as well as vaccines. I personally, I have the vaccine and I'm an academy graduate. So it stung a little bit when I first heard it, but I'm not an internet troll to say, hey, Jeff, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. That is not a useful form of communication. And if you are a tactical athlete and you are going to go into the military, law enforcement, or firefighting professions, I promise you, you will have to deal with political situations. Someone making a decision that affects you. It has nothing to do with what's going on the ground right there. It is a political decision. And those are hard to stomach sometimes. And Jeff made some really good points. And, one of his points about defunding service academies is nothing new. I mean, that is something that has actually been discussed for decades. And you know when it started, Jeff? After the Vietnam War.
Yep, that was my guess. You bet.
Because it was a cluster.
Yeah, all of those people that I'm going to say this is because this is my kind of context where you and I are going to agree on a lot of things. And so, like, I'm a history guy too, and especially like military history. And I look at like when Vietnam had this social sort of percolations that we feel now with Afghanistan. Like what we've seen is the transition of like some of the young Army officers that were in command at the time now are politicians and lobbyists. And so now you can kind of see this thing, what I call it's a cyclic sort of thing. And we're experiencing, and that's why we try to relate this some to fitness. It's very cyclic as well. Trends come and go. And that's just because human behavior tends to repeat itself. And I recognize that too. So that's why I was like, in conjunction to that point in making the video that I did, I knew going into that, making some of those statements, that there's a real possibility of alienating friends of mine, specifically you and guys that I know have graduated academy, because it's hard to make the compassionate statement about something without it really being formulated, especially in a 14-minute video that I did. It's kind of a blanket statement. So in an interest of actually having an open conversation, this is what we're doing, because there's very few people, to be super candid, and I know I've said this to you in so many words, but maybe people haven't heard this before. There are very few people that I really look up to and aspire to become more like, and you are certainly one of them. So regardless of your education status, regardless of anything, like I always have looked up to you, Stu. And that is why I'm doing this, because I know that the whole genesis of all of this is really morality. Like for me, it's like, hey, let's do the right thing, regardless of where you come from, and being able to have this open discussion with somebody because I respect you and I respect what you're about. I respect the institution that and that's why I want to draw back. I didn't do a good job of highlighting a more articulate institutional problem, because I don't want it to sound like this is a person problem.
Sure.
Like I really do believe in there's no such thing as bad service, right? Just poor leadership on all levels. So absolutely. That's kind of what I'm focused on in this one.
No, that's really good. And I want to also start this off with, look, I spent 8 years in the military, right? I got out in 99, and my education ever since has been focused on fitness training and that. I am not a geopolitical military strategist or genius of any sort, right? So I just want to let you know, these are just opinions from a normal guy, right? And I want to say that, Jeff, I feel the same way about you. I wouldn't have asked you a few years ago to be a part of this if I didn't appreciate you and what you do. And you're so smart. And like I think somebody said, Jeff makes me smarter, whenever he's on.
You make me far more level-headed.
Yeah. So
after I spout off, yeah.
right. But anyway, I knew what you were coming from. So like I said, I didn't take any of what you said personal. I know where you're coming from with it, and I respect your opinion. That's the big key. You need to learn, everybody here needs to learn to respect other people's opinions, whether or not you agree with them or not. And then maybe understand why they have that opinion. That's probably the most important skill you can have when you have to deal with political situations. When your military situation becomes political, you need to understand how that works and why it is a bigger picture, maybe more complicated than you think it is. So anyway, but my thing is this. I'm just going to start off real first. The vaccine, right? And the vaccine I decided to get because my aging father lives with me. He's, in his late 70s. He's had some health problems. He's immunocompromised, and it was a no-brainer for me to, like, as soon as he could get a vaccine, after reading about it. And I hate to say I did any research on it because that really degrades the word research. I read as much as I could about it, understood the risks, and the risks for me were greater having someone in our house catch COVID and spread it to him, and him being really susceptible to probably more serious effects than anything else. So that being said, that is my reason for getting the Moderna shot back in March. When I was offered it the Naval Academy offered it to me because I coach over there. And by the way,
Yeah.
I coach over there for free. They don't pay me anything to go over there and coach, right? I love that place. I love the people that are there. Could it be better? Absolutely. Right? Could there be better leadership? Absolutely. Could there be better graduates that come out of there? Absolutely. But anyway, that was my thing on I don't want to digress into the academy too much right now because that's part 2. But that was my story on the vaccine. And I completely appreciate everybody who decides they don't want to get the vaccine. That's your decision. The last thing I would ever want is to say you need to get the vaccine, right? That goes against a lot of the same principles you and I both hold.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's the thing is, so I'll propose it based on my life experiences, right? So this is a very slippery slope for me because I don't talk about the tactical experiences too much of the finite stuff. So this walks a fine line of like, you kind of got to talk some particulars. So I'm going to kind of walk a fine line here. The command that I came from is, how do I say this? The last command I came from, not SEAL Team 5, is, how do I say this? Deeply entrenched in the ongoings of chemical, biological, and nuclear warfare, and people around the world that want to use those sort of things to do harm to other people in whatever capacity, So I will say that
they understand their enemy.
Yes. Right. And so what I mean by that is that there are people and organizations around the world that are using chemical weapons, biological weapons, and even nuclear weapons as threat. So we, as people from there, get a deep education on how to protect ourselves against those threats: chemical, biological, and nuclear. Well, biological falls in the category of what we're dealing with now. In real world circumstances, I've dealt with biological warfare, real world, like actually actuating these targets, people that are doing nefarious things with these things. And when I did these things, and we did these things, we trained for them. Not just us, because the Marine Corps is very adept at chem bio nuke as well. They're very capable as a big unit. Like that's one of the big military initiatives, or I guess I say job skill requirements for our large Marine Corps units is chem and bio nuke. Big, that's come in full mopped up, contain the area, all that stuff that you kind of want to see like in the movie Outbreak. Literally, legitimately, that's actually fairly decent. Like it's an old movie, but it gives you an idea of the level of protection needed. Right now, we had some uniforms, we'll call them, that were far more sleek than the big bubble ET things. But nonetheless, I mean, they were multiple layered uniforms with charcoal in them, fully, like no skin exposed, none, because something biological like what this COVID virus is needs something to completely protect ourselves. And so then when this whole mask thing came out as an example, I go, whoa, like when we were literally tracking down people that were supposedly making anthrax, we weren't wearing a paper mask. We were completely covered. And the anthrax virus is larger in size than the COVID virus. Well, it's not a virus, you know, it's like the biological nature of it in its size.
Right.
And it's so I'm looking at it going, wait a minute, like so that's, you guys, I don't need to keep explaining to myself. I'm looking at it going, wait a minute, like this doesn't work. And we know this. We know because the physicists that are here, the nuclear biologists that are here, the biological physicists that are here, they're like, this doesn't work at all. Why is, you know, so I'm looking at these like the governing body of chem, bio, nuke in the world. I lived that for 8 years. I'm an expert in it, in that sense of protecting myself against that. Where are those experts telling society that this is a farce? The mask thing, just for an example. And I'm like, okay, and I don't want to get on the mask issue, but I just,
Well, I mean, if
it's
you
an
look,
example of my life experiences of going, hey, we have experts that are saying something that's completely being contradicted by our government or the CDC or whoever.
yeah, if you look at the hospitals that are treating people with COVID, they are wearing a lot more than the mask.
And the PPE issue, right, is this is like, so why do you think an example like doctors walk into like their operating rooms, hands up, palms down, or whatever it may be? And as soon as a person touches their hand to their mask, the mask needs to be thrown away. And we're walking around with our cell phones, touching buttons, touching everything. Every single time your hand touches that mask to readjust, technically needs to be thrown away.
Yeah.
And that's the world I grew up in. It's like, hey man, don't touch anything, because if you touch anything, what we have to do is you get pulled out of the operation. You will get quarantined fully. You're getting sprayed down with Pine Sol, wiped down, completely swabbed, and then you're going to be in quarantine completely by yourself for days, weeks, and months. Ooh. Like a real quarantine. Okay. So I'm looking at what I was taught of like, hey, this is how you work quarantine. This is how you work chem, bio, nuke. And I'm looking at it going, right. I'm standing in line at the airport, and people are getting yelled at for not having social distancing because we're not standing 6 feet apart, but we're in a big S line, and I'm standing next to one shoulder to shoulder.
But then that's you go sit on a plane shoulder to shoulder.
So again, it's the idiocy of it, right?
Yeah. And again, I get it.
And I look at it, and I'll just summarize this. It's like, I get it, folks. Not everyone has my life experiences, but that's my point. Is there are people way more experienced, way more intelligent than me that taught me all of this. Where are those people? Where are they at? Right? Because I worked for them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's my frustration, guys, is like, I genuinely care about this because it's either I was lied to, right? But I wasn't. I was taught properly. I was taught properly how to protect myself. And that's where we're at. I'm just like, it just confuses me. So that's my life experience. And that's why I've chosen, for me, I look at it and go, well, from what I could see, it's still considered an experimental drug. And from what I can see, from what I know of biological illness and whatnot, the best way to protect ourselves is stay healthy, exercise, diet, all those good things. And I've seen and been around COVID positive people almost on a daily basis. I've yet to wear a mask. I just literally had, funny enough, 3 days ago, I got a sinus infection. It's the first time I've been any remotely sick. So like, does it make me special or unique? No, these are my life experiences, and that's why I'm frustrated.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I will say that if you take a look though, and a good way to see if masks work at all. Now you can blame the mask, you can say the masks actually worked, is look at the flu season that occurred. Now it could also be social distancing, it could be people just aren't going out, but previous flu season in 2020 was significantly reduced. And you can also, the way we judge our flu seasons is we look at Australia's, because one, they're 6 months off from us because of different hemispheres. So they have their flu season in the summer. We have our flu season in the winter, and we can kind of gauge it. Both of our flu seasons went from crazy numbers. I mean, from like 100,000 to 2,000. I mean, it's significantly reduced. In fact, I pulled up a number the other day I was just curious what the flu season was, and it was like public health and clinical laboratories reported 2,000 flu cases from September 27th, 2020 to April 21st, 2021. And the previous year, they said 38 million were sick with the flu season. I don't know if that's where, I assume that's worldwide. But it was just interesting to see that, the flu season just went out, was significantly reduced. Now, I think the Asian community, they are wearing masks all the time. Like if they are ill, they get on a plane, they don't want to get other people sick, right? There's some logic behind that to me. And if you look at some of the statistics of just the flu season alone, now will it help with COVID? That I don't know. Maybe you need the KN95 masks to actually be beneficial from the mouth, but can you get it through touching it and then later touching your mouth?
Issue, right? Yeah, like I'm not as expert in that necessarily, like how, but all we can do is draw from what we know, right? And that's the thing too, is like, the counter argument is like, well, no, like the people that I've met and talked to that wear masks all the time from Asia, it's an air pollution issue. It has nothing to do with viral. So so then it's like, but are they saying that because that's what they've been taught or learned from their family? Like, who knows what their life experiences are, right? So, but I look at, I'm a math guy, I'm a numbers guy, I'm a physics person. I have a background in chemistry. I'm looking at it going, a basic background in chemistry, mind you, but I look at it and go, that math doesn't work, in my mind. And so, like, of course, we're frustrated all this, and I think, but my point, really, the unifying point for me is that I believe this, that really the vast majority of people worldwide, and we can only speak to the country, and then we're going to further speak to our military and law enforcement, really talking about. I would think that the vast majority of those individuals are pretty like-minded, and that they don't want to transmit a potentially deadly disease. They're willing to make certain sacrifices to potentially protect other people or not transmit something. And I think that that's a really difficult thing to do right now, primarily because there's so much misinformation from who we receive it from, which is really a monopoly. We are only receiving information from a very, 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 very small segment of our population, none of which are experts in the field, whether you're a news anchor or you're a reporter, whatever it may be. And so I think there's a lot of people disenfranchised, and I would definitely fall in that category.
Oh, absolutely. You have to have these conversations rationally with someone just to understand the whole thing, because there is truth somewhere in the middle. And on the left, you have fake news, and on the right, you have misinformation. Right. And then there's there's theories, somewhere in there, and then there's fact, right? So all of this is on this little spectrum, and somewhere in the middle, there's truth and fact in there. Right. And you really do have to do research. I mentioned it earlier. I said reading and research are two different things. When I say research, you need to actually look at some studies, and then who did those studies? Were they hired by pharmaceutical companies? Might want to take that with a grain of salt. I do the same thing with physical fitness studies all the time, because every study that I read is disproving somebody else's study that I've been doing for 10 years, thinking it was the correct thing to do.
Yeah, right? But then you have to look at the population it's studying too, and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't even relevant.
Wait, this is in lab rats. What the hell?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like because I think our instantaneous information, I think many of us guilty of it have fallen on our less of our like laurels and said like, well, like if it's this instantaneous and it's this, like it's got to be true, or it's got to be at least thought provoking, or it's got to be useful. And I think that's the thing. I think you said it correctly. It's like one side really is false, and the other side is all equally false, but just with a different light of I call it self-righteousness on the right side. You know what I mean? So, and again, I definitely can fall victim to that self-righteousness probably far too often. But I just, for me, this is an opportunity to say, hey, like, I've given this deep thought and I do have some life experiences. Take it for what it is.
Oh, absolutely. And your life experiences, having been in Afghanistan and Iraq for your military career, obviously, when things change over the course of a weekend,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that really, I mean, it lit up the veteran community. I mean,
Yeah.
veterans were pissed, you know,
Yeah.
especially the ones that were serving there and lost their friends and lost limbs and, you know, family members of those who died. I mean, it is.
So this is a real weird situation we're dealing with. Like not just the COVID stuff, but you're like, it's weird how this Afghanistan issue that we're just so new is, it's almost impossible to separate the emotion that people have with COVID or whatever with this Iraq thing. And then there's so many veterans like myself that are they're like, wait a minute, where's the voice of the people, you know? And it's equally more frustrating because so many of us veterans are, I would say, are doers, right? We're more, we action. We're not just going to speak, but we're going to put our action behind those words. And it's hard for us because there's nothing we can do physically to enable or enact rescue or whatever things we've been taught from our military service. We feel a little helpless, honestly.
Yeah. And you know what? Here's the deal. And you know, there's no reason why we should be asking our military to do nation building. You know, if you take a look at World War II, what we did with, you know, Japan and Germany is there were no German or Japanese strongholds still existing when we were there trying to build. It was an unconditional surrender.
Yeah.
Right. To think that we could do any nation building while the other side is just regrouping and rebuilding and just still doing their thing. Like it frustrated me so much that 10 years into this war, there were still red pockets around Afghanistan that were Taliban strongholds.
Yeah.
I'm like, how does that word even exist?
Yeah.
You know, a Taliban stronghold.
And I lived it, man. I spent 4.5 years in that country, man. 4.5 of my life. 4.5.
Damn.
Yeah. And I'm like,
so I can thoroughly understand your frustration, not only with the situation, but with the leadership of the situation, whether it's political and military or both.
Yeah.
And you know, like I said earlier, your statement to defund service academies because the leadership that is created out of there is crap. That's basically your words.
Those are my words. You bet.
That's actually your words.
Words.
Yeah.
Those are mine.
Like I said, I go there 5 days a week and I coach and I try to mentor these young men and women and in many different ways. You know, I love the institution. I give as much as I can as I received from it, you know, 30 years ago. But you know, with that, your argument is a valid one because it's been said ever since Vietnam, pretty much, is that why are we spending almost $400,000 per graduate, you know, every year to produce an officer in the military, and that's all military branches, and to create this officer when OCS and ROTC can do the same thing at a much cheaper cost. And there's some options out there too, is like completely go nuclear and just shut it down. right? The other one is to make students pay tuition, right? Make that an option. To shut it down and turn it into museum and or training areas for the rest of the military officer corps or regular, enlisted corps as well. There's so many different options that, I mean, this is not a new discussion. And every so often there's somebody that has to go up and to Congress and say, this is why we should keep the service academies, right? And they tend to keep them. Now, I will say this, what is it worth for a country to have, officers that were produced such as Eisenhower and Halsey and Nimitz and Rickover, MacArthur, Patton, what's it worth to a country to have an institution that created those, that has over 150 Medal of Honor recipients, to those institutions, history. What is that worth? Is that worth that cost? And that's a debate that is, like I said, it's nothing new.
Yeah. And there's my segue to that a little bit. And I'll try to really stay on point for this, because I said this to you yesterday. And after I said it, I had to really give it some thought, because I said to you yesterday before we, were on the phone, I said to you, I've never served in or around anyone that's graduated from the Naval Academy that I ever respected, ever. Now the only person is Pete Scobell. But I didn't work just kind of around him. We weren't direct line of chain of command. Now, I will say that I know officers that have graduated the academy that are spoken extremely high of, but I just didn't work with them around them.
Sure.
And I'll say that, I look at SEAL Team 5, the 3 officers, man, I would walk through hell in a gasoline suit for. I would. And they're all OCS. Pete Van Hoosier, right? He was his CO.
Yep.
Now I think Pete was almost 20 years, 17 years in the Marine Corps before he went in the Navy, or something crazy.
Yeah,
he almost did 20 years as an enlisted Marine.
Wow.
Before he got his commission. And then he, I think he retired at 39 years or something. And I look at that and go, holy crap, man. It's like the joke, like one of my teammates just say, like, so you could be as busy as a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. Well, Pete Van Hoosier only had one leg. And he was so busy, man. He was like, God, that guy, he's the reason primarily why there's a human performance program within Naval Special Warfare.
That's right.
While the craziness of the command he was still managing in different countries. And it's like, man, that guy, I really, let's see here. The CEO at the Buds at the time, man, like, Rick Smethers, man. That's literally since I've joined the Navy, I've written in the ballot for the presidential election. I've always written his name in. So again, but here's the thing and this is what I look at and go, what is that? What am I seeing by having these statements? And like when I got to the command, not a single one of the guys that graduated the command and the academy were I went through a green team, and the 3 academy guys, they were the worst performers in every single way except for running. Ouch. They like to the point where, like, the safety violations for us, you get 3 or 4 safety violations, you get kicked out. The top officer got 17.
What?
Right. And it's like he AD'd in the armory. They didn't kick him out. Right. And then you go like, what is going on here? Right. The best performer in our class, the best, was an officer from the Citadel. And it got to the point where they're like, hey, we only have 3 spots. I'm sorry. Got rid of him.
No.
Got rid of him, man. Yep, they did. Absolutely did. And he's working at the Pentagon right now. Woody. Yeah. Stud, man. Fucking stud. And so this goes on and on of guys like my troop commander, my first time there, like physical stud. Never got made XO, passed up completely, and it's like, so I look at that and go, okay, that's one piece. And then let me go to this, and then I'll shut up, because I just want to propose this question to people. And this is not an insult, and not meant to be at the individual. The insult for this is meant to be, who's making these decisions to not let these people do? And so these people I'm talking about are all you guys, all the officers that go do the academy, that go through OCS, go through ROTC, And you guys are all officers. I mean, you guys, I'm pointing at you, I'm sorry, but
Sure. Oh, I don't
the
care.
officers are expected to perform at a much higher level. Your standard is higher, your push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, all that stuff. It's meant to be, and it is, it's held to it through buds. And then after that, it goes, well, officers will never go to free fall jump master, static line, sniper school, breaching school. When you get to the command, you don't even do CQB. Like guys don't even, the expectation is that they don't even have to go through the house safely necessarily, because they don't even really go on target. And so I'm going like, wait a minute. I have all of these skills, right, that I've been taught through Naval Special Warfare. I'm a sniper, I'm a master breacher, all these things. I'm like, okay, and I'm going to go on target. And at no point, in not one time in my 11 years and all my deployments, did I ever on target get direction from an officer. Not once, not a single time. Why? Because either they weren't there literally on target, or it was recognized within the community statement, hey, the officers lease the land, enlisted own it. And why? Because the officers don't have, because it's not been given to them. It's the expectation that you guys have to deal with all the politics, really. Like there's the shelter that's supposed to be built, right? Essentially metaphorical. And I go, what a disservice to all the officers that come through. And now you're like, hey, you need to lead these men like me and a bunch of other guys. These guys have all these skills, but you have no inherent understanding of any of them. No one knows how to do any breaching, any of that. And so I look at it and go, how is it that these men are expected to lead me if they have no idea? And I can say this, I briefed a 2-star in Afghanistan, 2-star Army. And I'm sitting there with my team leader, who's the senior chief. And we're toggling back and forth. And he stops the meeting like a couple minutes in, and he looks at us and he goes, Navy SEALs. He's like, why are you guys even in Afghanistan? There's no ocean here. That's what a 2-star said. He's in charge of the battle space. And he doesn't even know who we are or what we do. And we are the tier 1 unit that basically is his go-to guys. He doesn't even know who we are.
Wow.
And I'm going, oh my God, it happened to me in the Philippines too, with an Army major. And I was like, what is going on with these people? Like, how do I get deployed by my leadership? I get placed in front of these people because they're like, hey, you need to be able to be professional and be able to brief, as an E6, E7, you got to brief admirals. I'm like, oh, whatever. But I did. And it was like, that's crazy. And I'm briefing them and they don't even know what we do. And it's like, okay, where is this? So I would love to hear somebody explain to me why men who are meant to lead me have never been taught, will never be taught what it is that we do. I'd love to hear somebody tell me that. Because like you watch Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, what do you see? You see 5 officers and a chief, right? That's what you see on target. Watch Tears of the Sun, a bunch of officers and a chief. It's like, that's not how this works. There are no, and it's and not to blow up anyone's parade, but I don't know a single SEAL officer, not a single one that I worked with that has gone through my experiences. Now I haven't gone through theirs either, mind you. And so I'll be the first to say I'm probably not the right person to politic and negotiate and get jobs, get work for my guys. I get that. But I'm just expressing my point of frustration because it's like, damn, I'll be damned if I want someone to work for me that doesn't know what they're doing. And I would never hire anyone in my line of business that doesn't know what we're doing. It's like, why are we going over there rescuing American hostages, killing top tier terrorists when the people that are in charge aren't even going on target to make decisions? What's going on? I'd love to hear.
Well, I will tell you this, even, in the 90s, it was even worse, when we would brief joint officers or even naval officers, even, guys from a different community. And that's what we did. It was basically a constant discussion of here's our capabilities. Here's how you can use us, in this area of operation. And we felt like we had to educate those people that were in charge of making decisions of getting us actual employment.
Yeah. And I've heard that discussion for sure. And I go, okay, that makes a real good sense of like, hey, like we need people making those convincing arguments to people that don't understand. Because if people don't realize this, it's only been in this last 7 or 8 years in which the Department of the Navy, specifically Naval Special Warfare, had enough high ranking individuals to make an impact, right? I believe Admiral McCraven was the first 4-star. Before him, there's only been like 1 or 2, right? So there hasn't, within the JSOC and the SOCOM, there's never been a whole lot of 4-star anything or 3-star SEALs. It's just because the SEAL community has never been a flag officer command until recently, in this last decade. So, and I think that's just because of Warcoms, JSOC, and SOCOM. But I get it. It's like there's some growing pains that we're experiencing. But I also go, why isn't Naval Social Warfare sending officers through these so they can have a better understanding of what we feel is frustration?
Oh, sure.
I guess, that'd
be great.
I mean, I know some guys used to do that. I know in the past, I know some SEAL officers, but they were Mustangs. They had been through sniper school, like Morgan and Luttrell, for a perfect example, right? Was a Mustang, had been through sniper school, all those sort of things, and then got his commission, and then, and then spent his time as an officer. And it's just, I look at that and go, man, and then that's a typically very highly respected position. Mustangs
absolutely.
typically tend to be on both sides fairly well respected.
Oh, absolutely.
And then warrant officers, right? That's always been the argument, is like, hey, let's get more warrant officers, because that's in that NSW, that makes a lot of sense in that sort of conversational conduit between those two guys. Because to make warrant, you have had to have been a chief or up for chief for a while in the NSW community. And if you are a chief, or you've been up for chief in the NSW community, it's pretty likely you've seen a little bit of combat, or you've had enough experience to make some of those better decisions. But again, this is just us kind of spitballing here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. Could there be different training programmings and education for that? Yeah. I mean, let's face it though, it's a different job than the enlisted job. It's kind of like discussing, Army Ranger missions and Navy SEAL missions.
Yeah,
it's a little bit different, but there are some changes going on right now. I'm not sure what that's going to do. I think it may bring better officers up, depending on, once again, who selects them. But anyway, there's some unique changes occurring, so I hear.
So my point of all this, whether it's whatever topic is, okay, whatever polarizing topic that exists within our military or law enforcement, this is my thought, is that what I feel like I'm in a best position to be critical of, not because and then I'll make this point too, is one of the good critiques I received as an enlisted guy from another officer, enlisted guy, I don't remember what it was, is just said, hey, like, if you have an issue, like, come with a solution, right? Yeah. And that's one of the big things too, is sometimes the solutions aren't just like, here's the solution, right? And so I'm looking at it from a big picture, which tends to be really confusing for me. So I'm going to tend to finalize this and focus on a point that I think that maybe I can direct my anxiety towards.
Sure.
Is I can't change what the academies are doing. Maybe I can influence some guys to make better decisions. I don't know. But I feel like, okay, if I'm going to blame the officer corps for being so shitty, okay, the reason why the officer corps is probably more shitty than it needs to be is because of the senior NCOs. Honestly, because if I'm saying, hey, the community knows this and we can talk about this, and I've just said, it's like, there's this, hey, wait a minute, the officers aren't going through these schools to understand me. Well, who is? The senior leaders, the senior enlisted leaders have gone through those. And it's up to the senior enlisted NCOs to go, hey, sir, this is probably what we need to do. So they're going to not speak up. They're in whatever it is. Like this for me falls on our senior guys, because why? Like we talked yesterday, like what, 1%, less than 1% of our SEALs are academy graduates, right? Probably.
Yeah.
Right. And so like 20% or 3% of the community or 5% of the community is really even officers. maybe 10. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's probably 1 in 10.
Yeah,
Probably.
The point is the vast majority of guys in our special forces are enlisted. So what does that mean? It means that our enlisted leadership has really let down our officers is equally, and that frustrates me. That really, because I have more life experiences in that frustration than anything in the SEAL community. I have as many more positives from my experiences in NCO. I just look at it and go, all right, guys, if we are going to hold, even me, if I'm going to hold officers accountable for being shitty, then man, that falls on me. That falls on me as an NCO or a former NCO, and guys in there go, hey, we're not going to do this because this is not what the community was best for the community. And that's where the conversation needs to be. You and I aren't privy to that. It may be, it's probably likely happening, you know? But again, that's where it's like, I need to keep myself in check and go, hey man, you teach fitness. Leave the Navy SEAL into the Navy SEALs now.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hard for me because it hits close to home, and you and I train guys for that. But
well, we get a lot of questions too. We get a lot of questions from young people who are preparing for this job, and they're like starting to doubt whether or not they want to even join. Right. And that's a tough one, you know, and I take it back to very similar times post Vietnam War. I think the only difference is I think the country appreciates the efforts of the soldier today compared to, you know, they were spitting on them when they walked past. You couldn't, most of them couldn't even wear uniforms off base just because they didn't want to look like
my uncle. I had an uncle that got off the airplane off the airplane in Pasadena, California. He was a SOG, SOG. He stabbed 22 times, left in a mud puddle outside of LAX.
Oh,
literally coming home from Vietnam. He was hitchhiking, was still a thing. Boom, threw up his thumbs. Some guys picked him up in a pickup truck, drove him right outside the city, stabbed him 22 times, left him in a mud puddle.
Oh, good Lord.
So, granted, I didn't have to deal with that. You know,
different times, right. But it's somewhat similar because people are starting to say, well, you know, that's 20 years of sustained combat has created a generation of combat veterans, which there's a good and bad with that. One, you have combat experience. Two, you have to deal with, you know, the PTSD, the injuries, the death, and dealing with the failure of diplomacy. Because, you know, it's kind of like when you have a fire alarm, you know, break glass in case of fire. You know, you have to break glass in case of war, send in the troops when your politicians fail you, when diplomacy fails. And then, you know, you have a guided mission that is acceptable to everybody. Everybody agrees, all right, this is a bad thing we need to take care of. We take care of it. But then we don't take care of it, right? Because we're not finished, right? We're not finished there. You know, should we have made it a strategic point there in the Middle East for the rest of eternity, you know, to have an operating base outside of that? But that would have required politicians to understand that we need to go 110% and get this, you know, unconditional surrender from the enemy, Taliban, and whatever other terrorist groups that are operating there, taken care of, and they're gone. Right. But unfortunately, we're dealing with basically an insurgency, which is a lot more difficult. And, you know, for me, I've always thought like this is a special ops mission, surgical missions constantly. You know, the more targets or the more soldiers have there, the more targets you create, you know, creating these conventional war and, you know, turn it into a conventional war.
Yeah. You can't find a conventional war in an insurgent environment.
No, it's not. And then,
that's no, and to your point, it's like the further escalation of what I say is separation from knowledge is right. that gap that I kind of tried to highlight between officers not knowing, and then they're supposed to be filled by the senior enlisted, and then the officers, right? But then you go above that and go, okay, on a micro scale, I go, with respect to my ex-wife, who has no experience in anything tactical. She almost made city council here. She almost got elected. City council here is in charge of selecting our police chief. What is that crap? And so that's why I look at Congress and Senate and go, wait a minute, like, why are those guys in charge of diplomacy? I get it, like, they're the diplomats, but it's like, there is not a single human being that is wearing a uniform that I know has relevant combat experience. If Morgan Luttrell gets elected, he'll be the only one with relevant combat experience that I'm aware of. Like, people, yeah, what about so-and-so? Who's like, no, okay. What do I mean by relevant combat experience? I mean, the vast majority of your time in service, you were in a combat environment fighting in these wars, right? Not, oh, I spent 22 years in the teams and never deployed. No, I spent 11 years in the teams. And I spent, aside from BUDS, SQT in the back year of my life, I spent that entire 8.5 years in a combat environment. And I know so many officers that did that too. And I'm going, sure, like, why are those guys in charge? Like, yeah. why are we even, like, I get it. Like, there's got to be, some sort of diplomacy. And I understand that. And I think that that's also probably the frustration for a lot of people is like, no matter how much we complain about this or me, it's not a simple solution. It's not.
It's not
at all.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, so I'm going to anchor my faith in this. I'm going to anchor my belief that the military and law enforcement, regardless of how the social dynamic is, whether it's post-Vietnam or it is now, the really morally sound human beings that we need and that we deserve, I'll use the word deserve, that our military and our law enforcement, they deserve morally driven beings. And I think that that's what we're just going to get more of. That'll never, like, the moral aptitude to serve is, like I say, like, the community chose me. It was a calling. And that's going to continue to happen for really morally sound people. And I'm going to keep anchoring my belief and my faith that morally sound people will continue to want to serve. And that is what I put my faith in. I put my faith in people like you who are going to go to the academy, who are going to serve honorably. I put people, you train them every day. I do too. And the guys that come through you and the guys that come through me and many other guys, man, like, we are spoiled.
Oh, absolutely.
The quality of individuals that you and I get to be around.
Yeah.
And I'm going to anchor my faith in those men.
Oh, I do. My workouts every day give me hope for the future. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, because these young men and women who join us for workouts know that they are, especially the last 20 years, they knew they were going to go to some combat zone for sure. And they wanted to. That was one of the reasons why they're joining. Right. And they want to serve in that capacity. But the unfortunate thing, and this is my opinion, like I said, I am a fitness writer. I'm not a military political strategist, is, our military has been used as a diplomatic nation building tool for too long. Right. Ripping that Band-Aid off.
The wrong face.
Was not pretty. And I think our politicians and our military leadership are to blame for, training an army that disintegrated in a week, but mainly because we didn't train them to do the things without us. Like, we were still running the logistics for them. We were still fueling the helicopters and maintaining the air assets. They're
it's not a self.
It's
not a self-sufficient organization, and like, it's easy. It's a struggle because we all have, we have some experience in that too, and it's like, okay, I don't think that there's an easy solution, and that's why I'm choosing to say, hey, I'm going to keep faith in the people that I know that are morally obligated, we'll say, morally drawn to do this. And, you know, and I think that that's a really interesting, beautiful disposition about Americans. It's like at first I looked at Afghanistan, for example, and I'll go like, these guys got nothing. They got nothing to lose necessarily, but why aren't they fighting back? It didn't make sense to me how someone, well, I could go down a rabbit hole of why I think that is, but now I look at America and go, man, I had a privileged upbringing in a sense, right? I won the genetic lottery. I grew up in a family that loved me. I grew up in a family that never had me go without food, shelter, or clothes or whatever means to survive. And I never was left without love. And man, like, what is it that was instilled in me to go do this? I don't know. But what I do is I see a lot of people, just like you do. We see a lot of people that come through and have that same, I'm going to go.
Yeah, they have a
great ton of hope.
Oh, great. Absolutely. They just have a why, you know, and it's embedded in them. There's no answer to why they want to do this. They just want to do it, right? It's a calling, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, you know, I don't know about you, Jeff, but I never had any hearts and mind training at any of the schools I ever went to.
No,
right?
No, it's quite the opposite. Yeah.
We're not, that's not what we are for. You know, we shouldn't allow Taliban strongholds, right? In a country that we're trying to nation build.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so yeah.
Yeah, I was saying, like, you know, we could go on and I look at it and go, hey, here's a lot of political problems. But here, I really do believe our way out of this kind of social inconsistency is I think it is in our military. Really, I think the military, okay, and I say, we mentioned the face, like we're not nation building, but the face of our military, we'll say, like, that's a metaphorical, the face, the way our society, the way Western culture, where the Americans typically see our military, it's fairly positive, I think, you know, has been in the past. And so I look at that and go, that's the key. Like, we can't let some of these bad apples undermine that vision, that visibility that our military has. And that's where I want to stand up and go, hey guys, I got it. I've been guilty of the past. Like, instead of me begrudging it, it's like, I want to keep telling veterans to support and go, hey, no. You see young people, you say, no, my service, it was worth it. And you should too. Your service is going to be worth it. And that's the point, you know? And it's like, I'm not going to get into discussion of, well, I don't want to get the vaccine shot. No. I'm just saying, if that calling is strong and you feel like you need to serve, that is where it's at. That's the change.
Yes.
Right. Don't deny that. Don't even yourself. Don't begrudge yourself, because the service is worth it.
Look, freeing the oppressed is a noble calling. Right. I love that saying, Green Berets, you know, Army Special Forces, to free the oppressed. You know, that is a noble goal, you know, and, you know, helping to spread freedom throughout the world is a noble goal, but it is typically not done through military action. It is done through social, economic, and diplomatic methods, primarily. But yes, there has to be a deterrent force there to make it actually work. You know,
sometimes you need a crowbar.
Yeah,
just to kind of get some space.
Unfortunately, I think we put these challenges on the backs of our soldiers, you know, for way too long.
Yeah.
And
it's like our law enforcement, it's like in the same guard. It's
absolutely,
they're not, they police officers don't enforce, they're enforcing policy. They're not making it. The police officers that pull you over, that show up to your house if you've been a jerk or whatever, like the police officers that show up at your house, they're not policymakers. They're an extension of trying to create stability in that policy. And I think that's where you're saying, I see our enlisted guys, our special forces going, oh, look, they're doing all this stuff. Look, they're shaping policy. Yeah, but they didn't create it. They're just trying to do the right thing. And I think that needs to be maintained. Is like, I don't want my negative connotation about certain aspects of the military begrudge the military as a whole. Like I'm only trying to begrudge some of like guys to make better decisions. That's it.
Well, here's my way to top this off for us, Jeff. Is if I was 18 years old again, I would make the exact same decision I made to serve, go to the academy. I had a decision. Do I want to go to West Point? Want to go to Naval Academy? Don't want to play sports. Those were that was my journey. And I knew I wanted to serve after, I did that. And I would do it all over again. Absolutely. 110%.
Same. Despite, I think.
I mean, today I would. If I was 18 today, I would do it all over.
Here's the thing too, is like on that same thing. It's like I wouldn't change anything about me, because typically, how to say this, outside of the fitness stuff that we talk about, I talk about, it probably seems like, and it's probably the true statement, that other things that I bring up outside of the fitness are typically not the positive sides of the community that I experienced. So don't let me finalize this from my point too, is like the 11 years that I served, man, I got everything I asked for and more that I wanted to do. I was so blessed to be able to serve in that timeline, as crazy as it may have been. And in hindsight now, as maybe as inefficient as then, would never change it. I will say that the men in large that I served with, by vast majority, like 99.99% of the guys I served in combat, were the most capable, utilitarian, useful, knowledgeable, whatever, all these amazing adjectives I can come up with people. They are that. And I'm complaining, and I'll say this, I'm complaining because I know it can be better, not because I think it's totally broken.
Oh no, we just have high standards.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's what it is, and I have the exact same high standards for the service academies. I'm a fan, still a fan. And though I completely understand the discussion of the expense of that, because I'm fairly conservative in my fiscally conservative, right? We could spend a lot less money as a country, or spend more efficiently. I think there are some good things that a government can do. I'm not saying we need to blow up all its institutions, but we can definitely be more efficient with our spending.
Yeah.
And I understand that the discussion.
Yeah, and I guess my final statement, I'll shut up, is this is not an institution issue. It's not a Naval Academy as it is an institution. It's not an issue. It's not even the federal government as it's set up, right? The Constitution, everything. It's like, it's not that. It's a very small population of people that are in that system degrading it, as far as I'm concerned.
You're exactly right. And I'll put a cap on this one, because I think this will sum it up pretty nicely. Civics actually works. Politics have ruined civics, right? Politicians.
Going, what civics do?
Right, civics. This is our government. Our government, the way the systems of our government work, and all its institutions and departments. Civics. It's a class in high school. Civics, right? Yeah. It's U.S. government, which is basically constitutionally based civics, and it works. It is it perfect? No, absolutely not. Is it better than anything else out there? Absolutely. Can we make it better? Absolutely.
That's the goal.
Can we make the military better? Absolutely. Right. And we just need to get out of our own way and learn how to make discussions with each other, so you can understand each other, where they're coming from, and actually make a better decision, instead of calling somebody stupid because you just don't agree with them. Right. It's more complicated than left or right, or red or blue, or rich or poor, or black or white. It's more complicated than that.
Not an ideology. And
right.
That's the thing. Everyone is attached an ideology to this, to me included at times. Ideological things fail. right? There has to be some compromise. There has to be real discussion. There has to be, even in my thing, it's like, man, one of the hardest things I have to do is concession. Like, it's okay. It's like, sometimes you got to make a choice. Do you want to be happy or do you want to be right?
That's a great one. I've learned that.
Yeah, I'm still learning that the hard way, especially in relationships, right? It's like, man. So yeah, it's a big topics too. And again, there's no one I'd rather have this discussion with or, conversation with than you, truthfully. So, hopefully people hear some of this and kind of can be a little more comfortable. It's okay to be a little bit confused sometimes. It's okay to kind of take your time and make some decisions. These are pretty polarizing things, and life-changing decisions can ensue.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Jeff. Hey, once again, I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your point of view on all of this, and your experiences that have driven that point of view. And once again, I just am honored to have you on and chat with you like we do. I consider you a friend. And once again, when I saw your live, I was not offended by it. I knew where it was coming from. And I was like, this would be a really good discussion to have, because I'm sure you probably had some comments that were trollish, right? But then you had some people that were agreeing with you and say 100%. And, that's the way it goes. And it's just stupid. Yeah. Let's actually have a conversation and understand each other when we have differing opinions.
Yep. And and again, that's a hard thing to do when things like this kind of make our blood boil or they hit close to home, and that's okay. But I think that's the thing too, is if you get really excited about this stuff or agitated, let it happen, accept it. And then, like, maybe what Stu and I are, find somebody to have like a counter argument with, not to be more resentful and hateful, but maybe it's like, you do try to hear what someone else has to say. And I have as difficult time with that as anyone.
Yep. It's not easy. I mean, I think first instinct is to get pissed and be offended, right? Take a couple deep breaths, do some research, talk. And next thing you know, you've like, okay, I see that point of view.
Yeah.
I still disagree with it, but I see it. I understand where he's coming from. Right. I'm not as teed up as I was, when you first see something. Right. So absolutely. Yeah. All right, man. Hey, once again,
appreciate
Jeff,
it.
I appreciate it again. Those you guys who don't know Jeff has a facility right there that you can obviously see called Performance First, performancefirst.us.com. Check it out. You can find me at StuSmithFitness.com. All right.
Thank you, Stu. Appreciate it.
Till next time, my friend. We'll see you.